Hi there, this is Dan and Jim with the Food Storage Guys, and on our podcast today we are going to be talking about water issues and what you can do to help prepare for the issues ahead. So Jim, how's things going for you this morning?
Great, Dan. Thank you very much. It's an important subject today. Water is one of the most critical things that we have to think about in case of emergencies.
Yeah.
It's important to realize that you can only last about 3 days without water, so having an emergency supply is critical to any kind of preparation plan.
Yeah, I know a lot of my friends are getting water storage containers and figuring out issues with their wells, and so I know I'm thinking about getting a well pump myself so that we can have pump water out of the well when there's no electricity. In the news here recently in Texas, back in February of this year, they had a big winter storm come through, which is very unusual, but it cut power to a lot of the residents there and the cities, and because of that, the pumps that pump water to the houses there in the cities were cut off and weren't able to provide water to people. So people were without water for quite a few days, and that can be very difficult if you aren't prepared.
Absolutely. And I think, Dan, it's important to point out that you and I have separate issues regarding water. You live in a country area. I live in a suburb. I'm probably more dependent on the electrical grid and making sure that the water pump that pumps water into my home is available. Whereas, like you said, you've got a well. I don't. So I store water in 55-gallon barrels. Of course, on Food Storage Guys, we sell storable, stackable water containers, 5-gallon containers, and I think those are probably the easiest way to store water. But storing water is only half the battle, because in an emergency I'd need clean water, and if I've had that in those barrels for several months, of course I want to empty them out and refill them about once every 6 months just to keep fresh water in it. But even after a few months, there's going to be some algae and some contaminants in that water that I'm going to want to remove. So it's important to have a water filter system of some kind. And personally, I use the Berkey system that we do have available on Food Storage Guys.
Yeah, I have one as well, Jim. I think they're really great for purifying water, just to remove some of the contaminants out of city water. And if you need water for emergency use, you can always go down to a river or creek to get water and run that through that and get clean drinking water out of it.
Yeah, the Berkey filters will take bacteria and all kinds of things out of the water so that you can go to a river or an open source of water. In fact, I think you can even go to standing water somewhere that's been in a puddle someplace, pick it up, put it through the Berkey, and you'll have drinking water after it goes through that Berkey system. So those are really handy, and it's something that you really should have in case of an emergency. Be advised, however, they don't remove salt from salt water. Nothing will do that.
If you go to our website at foodstorageguys.com and you go to our water section under Purification, you can look at all the different things that the Berkey filter will filter out. Yeah, so it's the arsenic that is reduced by up to 99% with the standard black Berkey filters. So if you want to do the fluoride, then you need the P2 filters for that, which do both.
There are 2 sets of filters for it. When you buy it, it just has the black Berkey filters on it, and those clean out the bacteria or sludge or any kind of contaminants in the water. But if you want to take fluoride out or arsenic, there's a special filter that you can use. It's called the P2, and you can buy that separately. They will both fit into the same Berkey filter, so you filter them both at the same time. At any rate, it's really important to filter your water. If you're storing water in barrels or in water storage, it's really important to filter it before you use it for cooking or drinking. And you want your water to be clean so you don't get any contaminants in it, because in a survival situation, getting sick is the last thing you want.
Yeah, that's right, Jim. You know, it's hard enough to be sick when you have all the conveniences and, you know, all the bathroom facilities and everything else, you know, available to you, or even medication available to you. But if you're in a survival situation, you're on the run, or your house has been burned up and you're off at someplace else or surviving in a tent somewhere, you don't want to be getting sick. So having good clean water available to you is very important.
And Dan, you mentioned the toilet situation. For those of us that live in the suburbs, as I do, if our water is cut off, one thing that we don't want to use our storable water for is flushing the toilet, because I don't want to waste it for that. So in order to flush a toilet when the water is cut off, it's going to take some of your water storage, or you can try a different system. If you just have some big black plastic bags available, heavy-duty plastic bags, and some cat litter, you can take all the water out of your toilet and put the bag in the toilet and use the toilet then, and then cover it with cat litter until it's full, and then take that bag outside. That way you don't have to use your water for flushing the toilet.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Jim. You could also use sawdust instead of kitty litter if one's less expensive, or you have access to one or the other. If you're just in the city, cat litter may be the easiest to get access to, but if you look around, sawdust may be available as well, or wood shavings. It's a great idea to not have to use water for using the toilet.
And so, as we mentioned earlier, you can use 55-gallon barrels to store your water. Obviously, those are heavier. You're not going to be able to move them around. You probably want to put them on some kind of a wooden pallet or something like that to keep it off the ground when you store it. So it's not going to be as convenient as the stackable 5-gallon containers that we sell on food storage guys. Either way, having enough water available for a week or 2 weeks emergency is a prudent thing to do.
Yeah, I know most of the emergencies where you see there's flooding or there's some kind of tropical storm, you see the people, going to places to get their stack of water bottles to just have drinkable water, and that's really sad that people aren't prepared at all for having their own water. And there probably is a few people, but you always see the majority of people are out there, looking for the government to provide water to them, and if the government is busy or isn't able to, then you have a problem.
Yeah, every situation is different, and you mentioned the water bottles. If you expect to wait until an emergency happens and go and buy those off the shelf, good luck, because the first 10 people in that store are going to clean them out. There's not going to be any water bottles left by the time you get there. So that is really not an option. After those are gone, then you're stuck waiting for the government to come and help you, or FEMA or somebody that may be able to rescue you, but I'd prefer being able to rescue myself.
Yeah, that's right, Jim.
So what are other issues, Dan, that can affect the water supply?
Yeah, this year, Jim, there's a severe drought in the west here. I don't know how much Washington is affected, but I think it's affected part of the way, but definitely Oregon and California, Utah, Nevada are all in kind of severe drought right now. And so we didn't have much rainfall over the wintertime, and the snowpack is very, very little. And so a lot of the reservoirs down in California are at their minimum right now. And so it's going to be very difficult. There's going to be restrictions on how much water you can use, and there may be even some severe outages, or wells are going to go dry because of that. Yeah, a lot of the wells in California are going dry because the farmers are continually using the groundwater below the level that the average person's wells are dug to, and so they're having to be without water, buy water in, just because their well has gone dry now. And so we're going to see more and more of that as the groundwater's been depleted because the surface water just isn't available. And the lakes and things like that, the reservoirs water that feed the major cities are, in dire straits right now. They're at the minimum that they usually like to see their level at the end of the summer, and we're just starting. And so this end of this year is going to be very severe. My parents are already starting to use stored water, which they normally don't have to do till the end of August or so. And so they're very concerned about their water, so we need to be thinking about, the lack of water in certain states, and I'm sure other parts of the country are also having severe drought as well.
You were talking to me about a shortage of chlorine for treating water and water treatment plants as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and the Washington Post was mentioning that there was a high demand for backyard swimming pools which require chlorine, and there was a fire in Louisiana at a chlorine plant that is creating a chlorine shortage, as well as in Westlake Chemical, based in Longview, Washington. There is one of the manufacturers for hypochlorite suffered a major electrical failure and is unsure when they can resume production. And so the supply that all the municipalities that use the chlorine to chlorinate their water with are really suffering here. One even in Oregon here, Junction City had a news article that they said they're having a severe shortage. They have about 2 weeks of chlorine left, and then they don't know when they'll be able to get any more in. And Lake Oswego, Oregon, and Tigard all had news articles posted, so it's definitely an issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't really see how COVID-19 isolation would relate to that, but I guess the COVID-19 isolation has created a demand for backyard swimming pools. And so people that are at home are using swimming pools more than normal, and as a result, they're using up the chlorine. So water treatment plants are short on chlorine. That creates an issue for drinking water.
Yeah, and when you have increased demand and decrease in supply, things like that, we see that when there's gas prices go up, when there's failures in the production, or some facility has had a fire or something like that, and then they're during the heavy driving season, when you combine those two issues, then you see issues in prices increase. But in this case, there doesn't matter what about the price is. It's just whether or not the cities are able to even chlorinate their water, and that can create unsafe drinking conditions because the source of the water isn't always from a nice pure source. It's usually from a river or something like that.
There's other issues that seem to be taking place in Morgan Hill, California, which is close to San Jose. They're at a level 2 water supply shortage, according to the city council. And the city council is demanding that they cut the water supply to consumers by 21 to 40% to preserve the water supplies. They're limiting residents on their irrigation use and restrictions on watering days and things like that. Plus, in another spot in California, they're finding that 300 drinking water wells and other water sources in California have traces of toxic chemicals linked to cancer. So there's issues with our water. It's not as secure as we've had it in the past, and it's not something that we should be taking for granted.
Yeah, that's very concerning. Yeah, when just not knowing what's in your water supply, it's important to, like Jim was talking about, the Berkey, having something like that to filter your drinking water through, especially, because that's where you're going to get a lot of your contaminants through, and be able to have, because these contaminants get in the water and you're not always notified until maybe months later. They put out a news release that says, oh, by the way, you may have experienced contamination a while back, and by then you're too late on that, and you could be getting cancer or other illnesses from contaminated drinking water, or being sick from it.
And again, we can't emphasize too strongly that in a survival situation, getting sick is not an option.
Yeah. If facilities like hospitals are filled up or shut down or not able to take anyone new, and you're sick, you may not have the option to go to the hospital to get treatment. Yeah, so I think the other issue we need to think about is how can we supply our water needs long term, and really being out of the city is probably the best option for any survival situation where things are going to get more tough in the future, and crime is going to increase. I was just having a police officer friend here that was telling me in Portland, Oregon, the murder rate is up like 800%, and also property crimes aren't able to be or aren't being prosecuted, and so it's not a place you want to live in if you can avoid it. And there's a lot of other major cities, so being out where you have your own well is going to be a better long-term solution, and getting a hand well pump for it, thinking like in that situation. Or if you're already out in the country, and you have a well, how are you going to get water out if the power is cut for long periods of time, maybe weeks or months at a time in the future? So having a well pump is important.
Speaking of pumps, you can also buy a pump for the 55-gallon barrel so that you can hand pump the water out of that. The best long-term solution is having your own well, but in a case like I'm in, where I'm living in the suburbs, I don't have a well, but I do have big enough storage containers, the 55-gallon barrels, or even if you have a bunch of 5-gallon barrels, you can go to a water source like a river or something like that and fill those up once you've emptied them. For example, I could throw the 55-gallon barrels in the back of my pickup truck, and about 3 miles away there's a water source that's permanent, a river, so I could use that to fill up those 55-gallon barrels, bring it home, and filter it through my Berkey. So that would still get me through quite a long shutdown.
Yeah, it's definitely important to look around, know ahead of time where you can go. What's the nearest place? Where do you have access to a river, creek or something like that, or a lake or a pond, some place nearby that that you can go to, and then kind of go there, see what kind of access you have to get down to it, because you may see, oh well, there's a river nearby, but the banks may be so rocky and treacherous that you can't even get down to it. So that may be a good Sunday afternoon drive to go find a place where you can get down to the water, maybe even under a bridge or something like that, where there may be a trail down there where you can know that you can park, go down there with a 5-gallon container, fill up, and see how easy it is to bring it back to your place. Because that's something we need to practice our survival skills, because when you need it, that's when you realize your deficiency, and you don't know what you thought you did know, and you don't have the skills that you need when you need them.
Exactly. And in that case, we're talking again about getting the water out of a river. A pump that you can throw a hose into the river and pump the water up out of the river into a 55-gallon barrel that's sitting in the back of the pickup truck is something that would be certainly worthwhile. So looking at the tools that you may need in a survival situation and making sure that you have those available is critical to being prepared.
Yeah, a lot of tools that you think will work. When you actually put them into use, you realize how deficient they are. They're just, this isn't usable. So like they have siphon pumps, or it isn't really a pump, but you can get a little siphon tube that you can siphon water out of a 55-gallon barrel into a smaller container. You say, oh, okay, sure, I'll have that in my supply. But when you actually go to use it, it may not be as usable as you think it might be. So you need to think about these things.
You should absolutely give them a try before you need them, so you know they work.
All right, Jim. Well, thanks for talking with me today, and I think this is an important topic we need to be considering yet again. You may have thought about it in the past a little bit, but maybe this is the first time you thought about storing water or for finding a way to filter it. But this is a good topic, and encourage everyone listening, to think about how you can prepare.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It is an important topic, and I think it's critical as the first step to preparation for survival. After you've got your water supply taken care of, then you can think of food and silver and bullets and other things like that. But the first thing you're going to need is water. All right, so next podcast we'll discuss the rehydrating and cooking of dehydrated food. Of course, you're going to need water to do that. So start taking care of your water first, and then next week we'll go on to discussing how you utilize your stored food supply. Don't forget to like us, Don't forget to subscribe, and please come back and see us next week.
Sounds great, Jim. All right. Well, take care and have a great week.
Thanks. You too, Dan.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Head on over to foodstorageguys.com to see all of our options to help you prepare for an uncertain future. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the thumbs up on this video if you like this show. If you have any questions or comments about this topic, please leave them in the comments below. And if you thought this information was helpful, be sure to share this show with your friends and family.